Check, 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 check. Oh, you're gonna make me do this? Oh, thank you.
So all the
Why don't
good
you bring
people.
me the mic for here? I hate this.
You hate this thing?
Yeah. If you would. Anyway,
That is not a mic. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. Those are things we use for worship. Yeah. These are mics.
go talk to that prophet. I'm sure he can heal you. Huh? Oh, did you? Oh, good. You know names. All right. Thank you. For the moment. Okay. Anyway, ooh, this is the other side. I'm not used to wearing on this side. Anyway, she told him he needed to go to am I gonna get this thing on? Oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm looking at it wrong. It does go on this side. Anyway, she told him he needed to go to. Oh my goodness! I didn't think. There. Yeah, now I got it on. Now this just clips on the back, so you don't yank it when you're pulling your head around. Anyway, she tells him to go to him, and he sends a letter to the king. I don't remember what king was in at that time, but sends a letter to the king, and the king says, "Oh, what can I do for this guy? He wants to be healed." So he sent word to the prophet. I don't remember what. Do you remember what prophet it was?
Well, he went to Elisha, was who he saw.
Huh?
He went to Elisha, it was Naaman.
Oh, it was Naaman, wasn't it? Yes, Naaman. Naaman. I know that name.
Wanting to be healed, so they told him to go to the prophet, which is Elisha.
Is Elisha? Okay, yeah. He was a woman prophet.
He called him Elijah.
Yeah, see, I didn't plan this morning, so I don't have those names in my kick.
You're doing well.
I'm just doing off of my memory. But he went to the prophet, and she didn't even come out and see him. He just sent word out with one of the servants that you're to go dip yourself 7 times in the river. Wasn't it Euphrates River? Jordan, you're right, Jordan. Jordan River. I'm glad you read that. He had you read that for me. Yeah, God's working. Anyway, you're supposed to go dip yourself in that amount of time. He brought all sorts of stuff. I forget all the gold and it was suits of clothing and all sorts of stuff. He brought all that stuff. No, he didn't want any of that stuff. And so they go down to the river, and he wasn't going to do it. Finally, his servant talked him into it. He went out and dipped himself in the river 7 times, and he was clean. So what did he do? He obeyed God. You start looking at things like that. He obeyed God. It wasn't dipping in the river. It wasn't the water. It wasn't the 7 times. It was he obeyed God. And it happened. So in this world, we need to obey God and look at his word and look at this world and say, oh, that doesn't match. I need to be doing this, and I need to obey God. So our lives could be harder, would be harder to a certain extent. We talk about the Israelites, how bad they were. Think of the you've read or understood a lot of the things that were in their law. Did they have a lot of things to do and special things to do and sacrifices and certain things they couldn't do and all this stuff? Was there a lot for them to obey? Yes. Did they have just probably as hard a time as we do to a certain extent in this world? Yeah, maybe. They were a little worse, but I think we have a hard time too, because we struggle with, do I go to this because of this? Or do I deal with this person because of the way they are? Let's be. Everybody wants to change your mind in this world, and we do need to watch over and make sure we do God's will. Well, let's see. What else have I got? If I can put some more in my head.
Part of you
I certainly wasn't
will
prepared for this.
always be a boy. You gonna be so stubborn. You get that from your mother. I already see it now. You weren't built for backing down. Boy, there'll be a small town night. You'll fall
At
for.
one point in his life, he was preaching and going around and delivering people and healing. His first wife was a healer. And his second wife just supported him and did with his ministry, helped with his ministry. He's a interesting man. You read his books and you start to understand him and where he's been and what he's did. He'd been in World War II. Oh, the one that We Shall Expel Demons. There's one about healing I read. It was by him. He's on the internet, on Facebook. His old videos are on there. He has passed, but his ministry, he has there's still a national, there's a worldwide what do you call it, a worldwide ministry in him. He's got his own organization, and he puts out books, he puts out all sorts of things. Still, he's dead, but he's putting them out. And very interesting man. He was in India during the war and he was a logistic person at a hospital. He dealt with the Indians that work there. And he dealt with a lot of things because they don't believe in God. They have their own ministry of their own. And he went on to do healing, deliverance, in a big way. He would do the national conventions here in the United States and teach that. But this is one of the things in his book. He goes through some of his ministry that I could say he preached a sermon to me over that chapter. And it was on we should obey and do what God says to do. And I look in the Old Testament, I look in the Old Testament, I look in the New Testament, he healed people. He spit in the mud and made mud and put on somebody's eyes. What did the mud do? It didn't really do anything. But somebody believed. Somebody obeyed. Yes. But why did he do mud? It was something simple, but if you really get back there, you know what he did on Sunday, right? He made mud. He worked. That was part of, he was stabbed at the Pharisees and Sadducees. A lot of times that was what he was doing. He was stabbing at them. They needed to change. And have they changed yet today? Well, they say there's glimmers of it. They will get a chance before it's over to come back and go to God. And there are Jews that do believe in Jesus Christ and do follow Jesus Christ today. There's ministers over there that do. And but still, they're not there. Will they rebuild the temple on the big mound? Will that be the big battle? They start to build that temple, and they build the temple because some people believe that when the temple is built, then we're going to have the big crash, because that will cause, they're going to take that Muslim mosque off of the hill and put up a new temple. There's plans for it. They've already got the money saved to build it. They're ready to go. Yeah, they're really close to doing that. But what has everybody said before? Oh, it's going to happen tomorrow. Let's not worry about that. Let's worry about ourselves and what we're doing for ourselves. But I know I read Revelations once in a while, then I leave it alone. I do think that it's an interesting book, and it's written in a language, it's written in something that the Jews would understand, because they're used to the way things are written. It was written by a Jew. You got to remember, he's seen it, and he wrote it in the way that other Jews and people of his time would understand. So we have to get in the mindset of those people before we really start to understand what's going on. The Jews do tell stories in secularly. They will start at the beginning, tell the middle, and then the main point, and then start over and do it again. But they won't tell it the same. They'll tell it from another standpoint. And then there's another way they tell stories back then. They do this, what do you call it? There's another way. They'll break the story up in the middle and retell the story. And you've got to take the two stories and go, okay, I see more if I put the two together. Because in the last chapter, everybody gets all, well, they've already talked about the seven. They've already talked about the seven. Wait a minute, are they talking about it twice? Oh, possibly. So there's a dividing point, about 12. That's what the teacher from Christian College says, and that's what Sam said before he ever listened to Mr. College on that. But yeah, and there's a 12 is an interesting chapter. A woman has a child, and it's a lot like Jesus, and it returns to heaven. And then the devil falls down from heaven, and a third of the stars is taken down to the ground. So when did the devil finally lose his keys to walk up and talk to God? Could have been then, possibly. Because we look at Job, and he came up and talked to Job, didn't he? Didn't we always think that was kind of weird that he could go up and talk to Job? Talk to God? The devil could go talk to God? So when did he lose his keys to go up there? Well, maybe then. I don't know. Sure does sound like it. And you got to remember, you got to know what in the old chapter they tell you what things represent what things in there. In the first chapter, he says he has 7 stars in his hand, and he tells them it's 7 angels of the churches. Well, wait a minute, stars are angels. Wait a minute, a third of the stars fell from the heaven? Well, a third of the angels fell. So there you go. But the last chapter's, it's there. Don't ask me who everybody is and what everything is. I'm sure I'll be very surprised to find out who they are. But you see also little things in there that give you time periods. At one point in time, he talks about the temple still being there. Well, wait a minute. That starts, then that's Jesus' time. That's the 70 years after Jesus. There was still the temple there. There was time after that. Romans didn't come in and tear it down until 70 AD. And that's what they say. Anyway, didn't come in until 70 AD, and then that was a terrible time because they literally moved them all out. So I'm sure that's a really bad time. We've had a lot of bad times through the years, haven't we? We've had World War I, World War II. We've had, the Jews getting slaughtered in these camps. A lot's went on. I'm sure some of that is right along there, but I'm afraid Bill and I don't agree on when and all that happens. I think it all started as soon as Jesus went back to heaven. So that's my opinion. And I guess if I'm going to go my opinion, Bill talked about the sin, the original sin that's passed on to each person, and you don't go that way. I think there's an original sin, yes. I think it happened then. But did they have sin in them, or did they know what sin was? Because the tree, what did they eat from? They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's the tree they ate from it. So they understood what was good. So when they know what's good and evil. So what are we born with? We're born with that. We know the difference between when a child gets so old, they call age of enlightenment. When they start realizing it, they know the difference between good and bad. Little kids know the difference between when they're doing good and bad. You know it, right? Most of them do. Even if they don't want to admit it.
The problem is we all know now what's good and bad, but just as Peter said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yep.
And so we know what's wrong, and often
It's that fight between the spirit. Once we're baptized, it's fight between the spirit and the flesh.
once we ate of the tree of knowledge, then now we know sin is entered us. Now we know what sin is and what's wrong.
Well, I know what's wrong with them believing that the sin, like a baby is born in sin. It has sin. Okay, no, the poor baby, think of what Jesus talked about, little kids and babies. We need to be more like them.
Come as a child,
Yes.
yes. As a child, they don't know sin, but yet they once they become, and that's why we baptize them or bring them in and ask them to understand what they're confessing to for the sin
Yes.
at an age, because prior to that they try to get their way and do things like that, but they don't understand that.
Yes. Yeah. And the enlightenment, when they understand what they're doing.
When they understand what they're doing, then they understand they need forgiveness of sin.
Yes. Yes. But we're not born with it. That's
After we've asked to be forgiven.
Born into it.
well,
To a world of sin.
we're born into a world of sin, and we know the difference between right and wrong. That's what they ate. They ate the tree of the knowledge of right and wrong. They ate of that tree. So that's what they had that they pass on. Not the original sin doesn't pass on down through them. Yes, original sin started it. And they know the difference, which he knows they're going to sin. And they're going to know it's sin, and he can't be around sin. So he had to go through this process so his son could die for us and pay for those sins and give us a chance, give us the grace that we need to come back to him. So I'm sorry, but I needed to talk about. that bothered me when he said it, and I just needed to talk about that. So I guess I vented on that.
The reason that God put the angels with flaming swords and threw them out of the garden is so they couldn't eat of the tree of life.
And live forever.
If they would have eaten from that, they would have been eternal like gods.
And they would have had that.
There would have been what?
They would have lived immortal. They would have been immortal.
Yeah.
The tree of life would have been given them. They wouldn't want to die.
They wouldn't have died?
No. That's why he took them out, because he didn't want them to live forever. It says live forever, if I remember right. Oh, they could. He had the plan. It just like they realized they were naked. They didn't worry about if they were naked because they didn't know it was anything bad about it. And he wasn't worried about that. Evidently. I'm not sure of all of his plan.
I'm a believer that God is ominous. He's everywhere, and He is all knowledgeable. I think He knew the book from the beginning to the end, as we have it in what we call the Bible, and the results of it. He knew us in our womb, in the womb before we were even born, and I think He knows what we're going to do. He knew what Adam and Eve was going to do. So I think He knew all that and had.
And I think I've heard it, Ray talk, that sometimes I feel like he chooses not to look and see what's going to happen.
Not that He doesn't know what's going to happen. He chooses to let it happen. We do the same with our kids. We tell them don't do this, or you're going to get hurt. And sometimes if it's not going to hurt them terribly, we let them go ahead and find out.
Yeah. You prophesize to him. You keep running up and down that stairs out there, you're going to run into somebody. Yeah, it's possibly going to happen, Jeff. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes our kids need to.
And I think God does the same thing with us. And since Jesus was here and died for our sins, went to heaven, He sent back the Holy Spirit to live in us, whether we've accepted Christ or not. We know we have that emptiness and that yearning.
For that.
Those that haven't accepted Him yet still have a void.
Well, they try to fill it with the world.
Yeah, I'm just saying they have a void, and they try to fill it to whatever they want.
Well, they seem to have a give me a new thing. Give me a new thing. I want another thing. I want a camper. I want a fast boat. I want a really nice car. I need a big truck.
Fill this want, but I want to be able to control everything in that. So.
And that is part of our problem in this world today is, well, we call it, I think I've heard it called the God syndrome, where we want to be God. Okay, so I've seen that, and they go, well, I've been told, I don't want anybody to tell me how to raise my kids. I don't want anybody to tell me how to do this. Nobody to tell me how to do this. I want to be in charge. Well,
What I say is that the older I get and the more that I learn, I realize the less that I know.
yep. And the less I know, I'm not in charge.
I never was.
Nope, never was.
But at a younger age, I thought I was.
Yeah, I think we do. In a certain point in time, we think we're in charge. But once we find God,
Even now, I'm realizing in the political arena, they aren't in charge either. God's still in charge of all of it.
yeah, because they.
History says time and time again, as a nation turns away from God, God raises up another power and not all those who were running around thinking they were in charge never was in charge. So
Well, the Bible's full of leaders that weren't of God, but they did God's will, and they didn't even realize it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as they read on the whatever their language is, that hieroglyphics, Pharaoh thought he was God. And in the Old Testament, the story I talked about, he thought he made the Nile. He claiming he made the Nile. God says, I don't like that at all. So I'm going to put trouble on him, basically. I can't think of what he calls it. It's no, I can't spit that name out. It's kind of an odd old terminology, but he's going to do it to him. And then he tells you how he's going to do it to him as a tree in Lebanon, and then about a big fish on dry land. Going to put him on dry land, and he's going to dry up, and they were no longer. And at one point in time, they became a whole lot less of a power. And the historians don't quite understand why that is.
God was in charge of that whole thing way back when the Pharaoh was going to kill all of the Egyptian male children. He was involved in having Moses put in the basket, floated down, to have him taken in by the princess and raised, so that 40 years later he would be cast into the desert and then brought back to Israel to free the people.
What a plan. Would you have thought of that plan? Anybody think of that plan? God had that in mind?
He knew what was happening, and God had this all orchestrated. So
Yeah, think of the orchestration to get them there and out. Well, think about, did God, once he had the Jews there and they were doing well there, did he cause that?
Moses wasn't a willing person to go do that.
No. He says, I can't talk. And you only hear of Aaron one more time then. Yeah. No, actually, I think he was scared of him. He was scared of him because he returned. When it gets right down to it, that's who does it all. It's all about that, doing God's will. Back to the original. And in this country we live in now is just do God's will as best we can do.
80 years later, in the process of that, when he didn't obey God and struck the rock that spoke to him, he didn't get
He spoke, but then he struck it at the same time. Yeah. Then he didn't get to go into the promised land. He was getting up in age by that time.
120 when he passed away.
Yeah. It's amazing if you... No, it's it would have been I can't think how old if you want to look at age, you start looking at some of the older ones before the flood. And then the flood, those people lasted a long time after the flood. But then the age slowly started coming down. Yeah. It's amazing how old they were back then. And it's slowly, as it come forward, less and less. Well, hey, I'm going to close in prayer. Dear Lord, our God in heaven, we thank you for this day. We praise you for your word. Watch over everybody as they go out this week. We thank you for your word and the story you give us. In Jesus I pray, amen. And thank you, Lord. Well, I guess Bill isn't going to be here. And Ray wasn't here either. Well, Patty, you'll get to use that book next week. Maybe. We'll see how we do. Everybody seems to be sick. He wasn't feeling good, and he thought he was going to be here. Well, thanks for adding in, definitely. I needed added in. I knew I didn't have enough.
You guys were interesting to listen to.
Oh, yeah, well, you're like me. You can get started on a subject and you roll right through. That's me. Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I need to turn myself off. I was a little loud.